Okay, let's get started. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you are. Welcome to the Bug Squad orientation webinar. I'm Mark Dexter, coordinator of the Bug Squad, and it looks like we got a nice group today. The whole purpose of this webinar is to help new members of the Bug Squad get started. So if you have any questions as we go along, please feel free to ask them right at the time, because, I mean, this isn't going to be useful unless it answers your questions. Now, I've got an agenda that I've worked up, but on the other hand, the most important thing is to address the questions and topics that people have. The areas that I was going to discuss was, first of all, an overview of the Bug Squad process, primarily focused on the tracker. And then the next thing I was going to discuss was the basic workflow, primarily for testing, but it's similar for other functions. But the workflow for testing using Git, and I was going to try to cover both the command line and also using an IDE like Eclipse. But those were the main things I was going to try to cover today. But if there are other questions that people want to make sure to cover, please let me know. And for example, if you just type in a question in the chat, I'll see it. So does that seem like reasonable stuff to cover to get started, covering the tracker and the process, and then going into the Git workflow?
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay. So first of all, some quick background about the Bug Squad. The Bug Squad was started a few years ago with the primary purpose of making it really easy for people to contribute to the project, either by coding fixes for bugs or by doing all of the other work that is involved in fixing bugs and getting them released. So a lot of people come into it with the notion that the Bug Squad is primarily for coders, but actually most of the work in the Bug Squad is done by people other than coding. For example, one of the most important jobs in the Bug Squad is monitoring the issue tracker, looking at the open issues, figuring out which ones are real issues, which ones are duplicates, which ones we need more information about. So there's a lot of work that goes on before an issue moves from open to confirmed. And just to back up for a minute on that, so everybody, you see on my screen, right? Everybody, if you want to bookmark one page that's important for the Bug Squad, it's this page in the wiki. This is where we have all of the articles that relate to the Bug Squad. So everything about setting things up, webinars, and other things about the Bug Squad process and so forth. So everything we're going to talk about here should be documented in this page. So the idea of the Bug Squad is that there's no minimum time commitment, and you don't have to be a super technical person to be a valuable contributor to the Bug Squad. The other thing that's really cool about it is we can use as many people. The team can grow as big as possible. I mean, we've got lots of bugs. There's lots of work to do, and so the more people that can help, the better. So, any questions about that so far? Okay. So, the Bug Squad, what our job is to move issues through the tracker. Most issues come in as open, and then the ones that ultimately end up getting fixed end up moving from open to confirmed. Confirmed means that somebody's looked at it and it's a duplicated bug, then somebody on the coding team will pick that confirmed issue up and propose a patch for it and make sure there's test instructions, and then it becomes a pending issue. That's where the testing team takes over, and the testing team's job is to move things from pending to ready to commit, and then myself or Jean-Marie or Christophe, one of the committers, will pick up the ready to commit issues and actually commit them into trunk. Okay, so the process isn't that complicated, and it all revolves around the tracker. Okay, so let's take a quick look at the tracker and how the tracker. Has everybody used the tracker and familiar with the basics of the tracker? Have a look at it. Okay. So there are a few tricks about the tracker that are really good to know. One that a lot of people don't know about is the ability to use a query. So, for example, we've got some built-in queries. A really cool one for, say, the testing team. Oh, okay. So, Lindsay's asking, Dean, Eduardo, and Stuart, could you please mute your mics unless you're actually speaking, because sometimes I guess somebody's getting some feedback. So yeah, just thanks. Thank you. Okay, so with the, first of all, for the tracker, you can obviously look up an ID by just typing it here. You can filter based on priority assignee. We don't really use assignee much. We don't encourage the use of that because people tend to assign things and then forget to take it off. So what we do, we use the category extensively. So this is a good way to search. And we can set up more categories or eliminate categories as things change over time. And then the status, of course, is really important. And the primary ones that I say are open, confirmed, pending, ready to commit, and then, of course, fixed. And then some of these others are used depending on what's going on with a tracker item. Now, that works for just doing a simple filter. So, for example, if I want to look up all the pendings that I might want to test, I just put it in there. But we can also either create queries or use queries. So, for example, I click on query here and run this query needs one test. This is really handy because it shows me the ones where this box here is checked. So it's had one test, so it just needs a second test. So for people that want to do testing, that's a great place to start, because if these are issues that if you do one more successful test, then we can move it into ready to commit. And you can also create your own queries. Again, over here you can, so if you're trying to look up something, or if you want to look up by date or by any of the other fields on here, you can create your own queries. So queries are a handy thing in the tracker. Another important thing to know about is this monitor button. So if I've worked on an issue and I want to, well, first of all, if I create an issue, if I open an issue, then I automatically get an email anytime somebody posts anything to that issue. But if I didn't create the issue, let's say I come in and start testing an issue or put in a comment on an issue, I oftentimes will want to keep track of what's happening with that issue. So if I go over here and click Monitor Item, then at that point, anybody that responds to this issue or changes this issue, I'll get an email notification. So that's really important. You can monitor the whole tracker, but if you do that, you're liable to get a lot more emails than you really want. But so what I do is I just try to remember to click the monitor on any monitor item button on any issue that I have worked on, and that way, I can keep up with it without having to remember to go back and look at it. And then for those of you who are testing issues, it's really important if you do a test to do two things. First of all, drop in this @test. That's useful in terms of helping us with the statistics so that we can count your test so that we keep track of, people's contributions. And that's primarily just to, recognize people that have done a lot of work in that area. And then the other thing, and this is relatively new, we added this a few months ago, to track how many tests we've had. So if it's the first test, then just click that. If it's the second test, click the second box. And most issues only require 2 tests, but sometimes if something's really tricky or complicated or has the potential to break things, we end up doing more than 2 tests. So if you test something, drop in an @test in the comment line, and then update the successful test box. Okay. So we've talked about queries. We've talked about documenting tests, and we've talked about monitoring items. Those are the main things that I wanted to cover in the tracker. Any other questions? Any questions about the tracker at this point?
Yeah, Mark. Quickly, for the open is when a problem arises and a person posts a problem to the tracker, right?
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
Right. Open is when there's a problem with the system and someone has opened it on the tracker, right?
Yeah,
that's the initial step.
Yes. Although, yeah, open is normally the initial step. On the other hand, if somebody who's experienced in the bug squad is entering a tracker item, it doesn't have to be entered as open. For example, sometimes if I find a bug, I'll create the bug and post a patch at the same time. So I'll just create the thing as pending and skip through. And if an experienced person has already confirmed it, it's fine to open a tracker item as confirmed as well. But when somebody who's not experienced or who's just from the community is reporting a bug, it would normally come in as open.
One last question. For the confirm, who can confirm able?
Anybody in the bug squad can confirm an issue. When someone signs up for the bug squad, I add them to the bug squad group in the Joomla project, and that gives you 2 privileges that the public doesn't have. If I'm not registered in the bug squad, I can't change the status codes of an issue. I can report a new issue and I can respond to an issue, but I can't change the status code and I can't upload a patch file. So, but once you're in the bug squad group on the Joomla project, then you have the ability to change status codes and to upload patch files or other files to the issue. Okay. Any other questions?
No.
Excellent. Okay, so that's everything I wanted to cover on the tracker. I guess for people getting started, one of the best ways to get started is to test issues, and I encourage you to just look through the pending issues and find some easy ones that you understand, and just to get started, just test one easy issue and change update the thing and get used to the process. But don't be afraid to make a mistake or to do something wrong or whatever. There are lots of people around to help answer questions, and it's not a big deal if somebody puts something in and it gets changed later on. That happens all the time. So don't be afraid to jump in and just start doing things, and that's how we learn. Okay. So it sounds like everybody here knows how to set up a local instance of Joomla using XAMPP or WAMP or one of those things. Is that correct? Because that, normally when we're testing stuff, that's normally how you would do it, is test it on your own local instance of Joomla. And again, there's a lot of documentation here. For example, if you want to learn how to set up Eclipse, this article is pretty good, and it also talks about how to set up XAMPP. And if anyone wants to expand this article or write another article about setting up a different environment, that'd be great. I mean, the more options we have for people, the better. There's nothing magic about Eclipse. It's just that's the one I'm familiar with. So that's I wrote a lot of the documentation about Eclipse, but obviously other people have written about NetBeans or and there are a lot of other environments. So anybody that wants to is welcome to to jump in here. For example, it'd be really great if we had an article in here about Tortoise Git or some other Git client. The more information we can develop in here for that, the better. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the Git workflow, and I'm going to focus. There's this article that I wrote a few days ago called Git for Testers and Trackers, and this is really trying to focus on the workflow for how to do the basic workflow using Git. How many people have Git installed on their system right now?
Yes, I have it as a plugin in NetBeans.
Okay. Does anybody not have Git installed?
Yes, me.
Okay. Have you? Okay, so we got Tortoise, we've got NetBeans. Excellent. Okay, well, I mean, Git, the command line version of Git, I believe, is available for every platform. So what I'm going to do here is show the basic workflow using both the command line, and then I'll show Eclipse. Now, the NetBeans is going to be very, very similar to Eclipse. So I think and if somebody wants to add, if one of the NetBeans users wants to go in here and add NetBeans to this article, that would be fantastic. And if somebody with Tortoise wanted to do that for Tortoise Git, that would be really welcome as well. Because again, we're not trying to push any particular methodology. It's just what I'm familiar with, and so what I'm comfortable documenting. Okay, so the basic workflow for, let me just make this a little bigger. The basic workflow for using, for testing, for the testing team, is going to be, first of all, to set up a Git repository on your local machine that's linked to the GitHub repository. So the first step is setting it up locally. Then the second part of the workflow is we need to keep our local repository updated with the changes that happen in trunk. And then that's just kind of the ongoing maintenance. And then of course, the testing work is to apply patches or pull requests, and then test either with the patch or without the patch to decide whether the proposed patch seems to fix the issue or not. And then, of course, part of that is when we're done working on an issue, we want to reset the files back to their unmodified state, so then we can work with work on a different issue. And then the last part of it is, a little bit more advanced topic, is to be able to work with older versions to sort of turn the clock back. So, for example, if there's a new bug that's been introduced, sometimes it's really helpful to know which commit introduced that new bug. And so to do that, you can go back and test with older versions and figure out exactly which commit broke something. Okay, so that's the basic workflow. And let me see here. Let's just go to GitHub real quick. Okay, so to create the local repository, it's pretty easy. You basically once you've got the Git program installed, you just do the git clone command, and you can use different URLs. In this instance, we're only going to be reading from the GitHub repository. We're not going to be writing changes or pushing changes back to the GitHub repository. So in that case, if I'm out here at GitHub in the Joomla CMS, I can use the git read-only URL, and here's a little handy thing to copy that to your clipboard. So that's where that URL comes from. So the command is just git clone and then that URL, and then it'll work for a few minutes, pulling everything down. And that's all you have to do to create your own local repository for Git. And when you do that, it automatically knows that this URL is what's called your origin, and that just means that's the remote place where you got the code originally. Okay, and in Eclipse, it's similar, but it's just done with the UI, with the GUI. So, for example, in Eclipse, I come in here, and there's a button called Clone a Git Repository, and I go through there, do Next, and so on, and the steps are documented in the wiki here. You just go through the wizard, and it'll create, again, it does the same thing. A very important point for those of you who are using an IDE or Tortoise or any other Git-based program, you can mix and match command line and the GUI. So, for example, if I wanted to, if it was easier, I could use the command line to create the repository, but still manage the project in Eclipse. And so you can mix and match command line and the IDE or Tortoise or NetBeans or whatever. Okay? So if you find some things are easier to do with the command line and other things are easier to do via the IDE, that's just fine. Okay, so that's basically setting up your initial project. Okay, then keeping the local project up to date with changes in trunk is really easy. You just at the command line, you just do git pull origin. And you always want to make sure, if you're using branches, and we'll talk about branches in a few minutes, if you're using branches, you want to make sure you're on your master branch, and you want to make sure that your master branch is not changed. So you don't normally want to make changes in your master branch. So you would make sure you're on your master branch by doing get checkout master, and then you just do the command get pull origin, and that'll pull all the changes from the CMS trunk down to your local repository. And if you want to do that from Eclipse, it's super easy. You just go, so I go team, switch to master. So that'll switch, and you'll see it up here. It'll show master now. And in case I've already pulled this, I'm up to date, so I don't need to do anything. And if I do get status here, it'll show me that I'm on master. I'm in the same, and then I can do get pull origin, and it'll do the same thing. So that's how we keep things up to date with the trunk. Any questions with that? So we've covered how to create the initial repository, and we've covered how to keep up with changes from trunk. Okay? So no, I have a password because I have, Edward is asking, do we need a password in that instance? Normally it won't ask you for a password because if you've used the read-only URL. In this case, I have commit privileges on that repository, so it asks for a password. Okay, so let's cover now the actual workflow of testing and using patches. And this is obviously the most complicated part of this process. Okay, first of all, there's a really important thing to understand about patches, which is that we're kind of right now in a transition between using SVN and using Git. And so there are, there are two different kinds of patches floating around. It's easy to see which is which. The Git patches have in the files, when they name the files that are being changed, have this A/ and B/ in front of them. The SVN style patches don't have that A/ and B/. Okay, so it's not a problem. We can deal with either one, but we need to know which one we're dealing with. Normally, if you do and we'll see this, if you do a diff off of the GitHub to get the patch, then it'll have this A/ and B/. And most of the patches, all the patches made with SVN and a lot of the patches posted on tracker issues will be made without this. So you just need to be aware of it, and we can handle either kind in Git. Okay. So now we're going to talk about this in there are two different strategies you can use when you're working on issues and testing issues. Okay. You can either use branches, local branches in your Git repository, or you can do it without branches. Okay. So first of all, we're going to cover doing it without branches, and then I'll talk about how you could do the same thing with branches. Okay. So and then we'll talk about how you handle the two different formats. It's documented here, but I'll show you in examples. Okay. So if there is a branch, let's see here, what do we do? Okay. So first of all, how do you get a patch? Well, some issues will have patches already, and then some issues would just have a URL to a diff. Okay, so for example, in this case, I've just got a URL to a diff file, and that'll just pull up a diff right here in my browser. Okay? And because it's a git diff, it's going to have this A/B/ in front of it. Okay? So now, if I wanted to apply this using the command line, I would just, I could do a couple things. The simplest thing probably is to save it. There's probably a way to do it. Let me see. I've never tried this. I tell you never to try anything new in a demonstration, but try this. So git. Don't usually use the command line for this. So git apply. That should work. Git apply. Is it std input? Is that how you do it in something like that? Oh, okay. How do I do? There's a way to do this from the clipboard. Who's a Linux person here? How do you redirect input from the clipboard? Okay, well you can always save it to a file. So let's just do that. I know that'll work. So if I do that, and then okay. So now, actually, okay, so now I've got that saved. So if I do git apply test patch, well, no, that's not what I wanted. Why doesn't it like that one? Let me try this. This is how I normally do it. Team apply patch. And because this is a Git style patch in Eclipse, you need to tell it to ignore the leading path name segments. And then that'll apply that patch to your master of your trunk. I don't know why it's not working with the command line, but it should be the same process. Maybe I have an extra line at the end. Oh, it looks okay. Okay. So that's the process of applying a patch. And I'll look up and document. There's probably a way to do it from the clipboard at the command line as well. I don't happen to remember off the top of my head how you redirect something from the clipboard. Then, in this case, I'm still working in master, so I've applied it. Now I would do my testing. Then when I'm done testing, I need to clean up master because I don't want to keep the altered files. I want to put the files back to their normal state. So the way I would do that is if I'm out here at the command line and I do get status, it'll show me what I've got modified and then any files that I've added as a result of this patch, okay? And I want this to be clean. I don't want to have any changes at this point. I'm done with this patch. So there are a couple ways I can do it. I can do a couple of git commands. I can do git reset hard, and that will get rid of the changed files. It doesn't take care of any files I added. So to do that, I would go git clean fd, and the f tells it to get rid of any files I've added, and the d tells it to get rid of any folders I've added. And then now, if I do git status, it should be back to clean, okay? And I can do the same thing in Eclipse. So I go back and apply that patch again. And again, I have to, because it's a git patch, I have to put one leading path segment in there, and then it gives me the nice indication saying it's going to apply. And now it's changed again. The other trick you can do in Eclipse, and probably in NetBeans as well, is you can do apply patch, and then you can say reverse the patch. So in this case, okay, so again, the workflow here is you get the patch either from the .diff URL or from the tracker if there's a patch file uploaded. You apply the patch, you test, and then once you're done, you unapply the patch. Okay, so it's basically the same workflow as you would do in SVN. Okay, any questions about that so far? The leading path segment, Gene's asking about the leading path segment. That's the thing that is the difference between the git patch and a, let's see, where is it? Here. That's whether it's got this A/B/, which a git diff has, whereas the old style SVN patches don't have that A/B/. So that's what that leading path segment is referring to. Any other questions? Okay, now a really cool thing about Git, and it's a little bit more advanced, but it's really pretty simple, is that you can very, very easily create what are called branches in your local Git repository. And you can have as many branches as you want, and it's really easy to switch back and forth between the branches. Excuse me for just a moment. I've got some construction going on outside my house here, so it could be a little bit noisier from now on. Okay, so let's talk about that same workflow using branches, because I think this is for once you get a little bit more experienced and comfortable with Git, I think this is how most people want to do it. And the idea here is that it's really easy and fast to create a branch. So it's quite easy to create a new branch for every different issue you're working on. Okay. So for example, if I wanted to do that similar workflow, I can do git branch, my issue, and that'll create a new branch called My Issue, and then I can go check out My Issue, and now I'm on My Issue branch. So now, if I go and I'm going to switch to Eclipse here well, let's see I have some other patches. What patches I have here? Just a second. Okay, so let's try this. Okay, so now I'm on My Issue branch, and I'm going to apply this patch. No, let's do it this way. Let's see. This is why I don't like command line. This is why I prefer using an IDE. What did I do? Mistype it? What am I doing wrong here? File. Oh, I didn't type the name right. Huh. Okay, well, we'll forget the command line for right now. There's something in the way I'm doing this. It's not right. But anyway, let's get back to focusing on the branches. So I'm then, if I go over here to Eclipse and I apply I will apply the patch here. Let's do it from a file this time. Okay, so we'll apply the same test patch we've been using. And again, we have to change this leading segments in Eclipse. So I've applied the patch again, but I'm in the My Issue branch, and now what I want to do, because I'm in this branch, I can go commit, and I'm actually going to commit these changes to the branch. This isn't doing anything with GitHub. This isn't doing anything with the remote repository. This is all just happening on the local workstation. I do the commit now, and now that patch is actually part of this branch. Okay, so now I can test this, and if I want to say, well, how does this work in trunk without the patch? I can just switch back to master and just switch back and forth, but my branch is still there. So if I want to test some in master, I can do that. Then if I say, oh, I want to test some more in that branch, I can go back to my branch. So I can quickly, oh gosh, I can quickly switch back and forth here. Yeah, I've got some, I should clear that out. Okay. So again, the idea of working with branches is you would, instead of applying the patch in your master, you create a new branch for the issue, switch to that branch, apply the patch there, commit the patch there, and then you've got an easy place to go back and find that exact state of the repository later. And then it makes it really easy to switch back and forth. And then when you're done with that, you don't want to keep adding branch. Obviously at some point you want to be able to delete the branch. You just go in Eclipse. You'd go in Advanced and delete the branch, or there's the command line equivalent. So this is an area where Git is really a lot better than SVN, because SVN is not helpful when you're working locally and trying to keep track of different things, whereas that's where Git really shines. It makes it really easy to have as many different versions of the programs around locally as you like. I apologize for the confusion on the command line stuff, but is that clear? Does people get the idea of how to use the branches? Any questions about this? Because this is really important if you're thinking about using Git locally. And this is why developers really, once they've gotten over the learning curve, most developers really prefer working with Git, because it really changes the way that you do stuff. For example, if you're coding, with SVN, the only time you would commit stuff would be, when you're all done and everything is tested and you think you've got something good, then you would commit it. With Git, you might commit something every 15 minutes or every, half hour or even more frequently or whatever. And you might say, well, let me try this approach and do some stuff and then create a branch for that and commit it. And then say, well, I've got a better idea. Well, let me try this other way to do that same thing. You just create another branch, and work over there. And then and then if you say, oh gosh, I just broke something. How do I want to go back to where I was a few minutes ago? It's real easy. So you can use the version control, really as part of your workflow as you're developing things, and use it as kind of an instant backup and be able to do things. Right. Okay. So the question from Eduardo, we have to remember to pull the latest trunk before adding the patch into a branch. Is that a correct statement? The branch is going to be, when you initially create the branch, it's going to be a copy of the master at that point in time. Okay, so yeah, if you have a branch that, if you're just working on testing a bug, you don't really need to worry about this. If you have a branch that's going to be around a long time, then you need to worry about getting new changes from trunk into your branch, and that's done with. There are a couple different ways you can do that, and that's a little bit more advanced, but you either use a merge or you use a rebase, and either of those methods works to update a branch. So for example, if I have a branch that's out of date, let's see which, okay, this is a branch that's probably out of date. So if I do, merge. Where's merge? Merge to master. I'm on this Finder branch and I do merge to master. It'll pull all of the changes that, so in this case I had a couple commits from master that weren't in that branch. But again, that's normally only something you would do if you have a branch that stays around for a long time. If you're using branches primarily for testing, then that normally isn't going to be a big problem. Any other questions about this?
Mark, so when you merge, you're actually pulling what's on GitHub function to your local repository?
No. Okay, good question. Yeah, when master into that new branch. Okay, so I could have pulled directly, but I would normally pull it from local. So I would do two steps. First of all, I would go team, switch to master, and again, to make the workflow as simple as possible, master we should make sure that master is not altered. Okay, so master is just an actual copy of the remote repository. And then if that's the case, then I can just do team pull, and then master's up there. Oh, look at that, somebody's JM just did another commit here. So there we go. So we've just pulled that from GitHub. And then now my local master is up to date with GitHub. So now if I go back and switch to the other branch and then go team merge and merge with my local copy of master, I don't have to go back to the GitHub repo because I just pulled everything from the GitHub repo into there. Does that make sense? And then I should see that same, whoops, I got to do a refresh here. Okay, let's try this again. Oh, I'm already merged, okay. Yeah, it says it gave an error, but the merge still worked. Does that make sense? So the workflow I would do would be to the master. Okay. Any other questions about that? Something got messed up here. Okay. So the only other thing I wanted to talk about briefly, and we don't need to go into this in detail, is one of the really cool things about version control, and this isn't that much different between Git and SVN, is the history. And in Eclipse, we get a really nice view of the history, and then it's really easy to turn the clock back to an earlier version just by right-clicking and say checkout, wherever it is. That was the top there. So that makes it really easy to test when a bug was introduced. Well, that's everything that I wanted to cover. Does anybody have any other questions? Okay, so Dean's asking, how do you commit these patches to the branch, from the branch to the remote repository? And we probably should do another session. If you're wanting to be doing coding on GitHub, and you'll want to set up your own repository on GitHub that's a fork of the project. Because normally, unless you're a committer to the project, and there's only a few people that do that, you wouldn't be committing directly to the CMS repository, but you can create your own fork on GitHub, and then you can commit to that. And the normal workflow there is going to be to create your fork, and then you're responsible for keeping your fork up to date. So the workflow there would be, again, to have a project, say in Eclipse, that is a clone of your remote. Then you would pull changes from the CMS repository into your local project, and then you would push those or commit those changes back to your fork, and then that keeps your fork up to date. And then you would have a clone of your fork on the local, and you would create as many branches as you want locally, and then you can push those branches up to your remote. But we probably want to, if we want to do that, we probably should have a session. And Reuven did a session in New York on how to do all that stuff in Git. So, and I think there's a webinar of that. I think there's a recording of that session from the New York City Joomla Day available online. If you Google on the New York City Joomla Day, you can probably find Reuven's presentation on that. But it's actually pretty easy, and once you're comfortable with it, it's pretty quick. Any other questions? Okay, so the other thing I would mention is that if people want to see a webinar on some other topic, for example, we want to have a webinar on Git for more oriented toward developers, I'm sure we could get somebody to do that, get Reuven or somebody to do a webinar just that was really targeted to that kind of thing. Or if there was some other topic that people wanted more coverage of, we can do as many of these webinars as will be useful for people. Okay. Well, thank you very much, everybody. I hope you got something out of this, and I'm going to stop the recording and say goodbye for now. Good. Okay.